Number 3. Facebook Marketplace Horror Stories Animated. Was Story 1 the bedroom set? My name is Carla. I was 31 years old, a registered nurse living in San Antonio, Texas, working rotating shifts at a hospital on the north side of the city, and slowly furnishing a new apartment after ending a long relationship that had required me to start over with almost nothing. Facebook Marketplace had become my primary source for affordable furniture because the listings in my area were plentiful, and the platform showed seller profiles with real names and photos which felt safer than anonymous Craigslist ads. The listing I found on a Tuesday evening said, Queen bedroom set, solid wood dresser and nightstands, included excellent condition $800 seller, willing to negotiate, located in the Stone Oak area. The photos showed beautiful furniture, dark cherry wood, clean lines, minimal wear. The seller's profile showed a woman named Linda Garza, mid-50s profile photo of her at what appeared to be a family gathering. Several years of account history and friends in common with people I knew peripherally. Everything about the listing presented as legitimate and safe. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you are listening from tonight. And stay with me because Linda Garza was a real person and the furniture was real, and none of that turned out to be the problem. The problem was the man who was at Linda's house when I arrived to pick it up, and what I found when I looked in the back of his truck. I messaged Linda on Tuesday, and we agreed on $700, a small negotiation she accepted without resistance. She told me pickup would need to be Saturday morning, because that was when her son would be available to help load the furniture. She said her son had a truck and was strong and could help my moving helper and I get everything into my vehicle. I confirmed Saturday at 9 a.m. and she gave me her address. I brought my coworker James, who had agreed to help me move in exchange for dinner afterward. We arrived at 9:05 on a Saturday morning in a residential neighborhood of well-maintained homes with large yards and mature oak trees lining the streets. Linda's house was a single-story brick home with a 2-car garage and a neatly kept front yard. A large pickup truck was parked in the driveway with the tailgate down. Linda answered the door before we knocked. She was exactly as her profile photo suggested, warm and energetic, the kind of person who fills a doorway with presence. She thanked us for coming on time and walked us through the house to the master bedroom where the furniture was already partially disassembled and ready for loading. A man she introduced as her son Marcus was in the room. He was around 30 large and greeted us with a handshake that was correct in every mechanical detail, but had nothing warm in it. We started carrying pieces to the truck. Linda stayed inside while Marcus, James, and I moved the furniture. The dresser required all 3 of us, and during that carry, I noticed that the bed of the truck already had items in it under a tarp before we added the bedroom furniture. A tarp pulled tight and tied at the corners over something that created irregular shapes underneath, not flat like moving blankets, but raised in multiple spots like objects of different sizes. Marcus positioned himself on the tailgate side of the dresser, which meant his back was to the truck bed for most of the carry, and he was directing the angle of the piece so that my view of the tarp was consistently blocked by the furniture we were moving. By the time the dresser was in the truck, he'd pulled it forward and positioned the bedroom pieces behind it so that the tarp was no longer visible from the driveway. James and I went back inside for the nightstands. I took the longer route around the truck on the way back and looked at the tailgate from the side as I passed. And the tarp covered the front third of the truck bed, and the shapes underneath it were irregular enough that I could see the outline of what appeared to be electronic equipment, a rectangular shape that could have been a television, a smaller shape that could have been a laptop or a speaker, and what appeared to be a box with a cord hanging from under the tarp edge that Marcus had not noticed when he arranged the furniture. I said nothing to James until we were back inside carrying the nightstands. I whispered to him what I had seen. He said to pay and get out and call someone. I agreed. We finished loading. I paid Linda $700 in cash, which she counted and folded and put in the front pocket of her cardigan. She thanked us genuinely and said she hoped I would enjoy the furniture in my new place. Everything about Linda was consistent and real, and I believed then and believe now that she had no knowledge of what was under the tarp in her son's truck. James drove us out of the neighborhood. I called San Antonio Police non-emergency from the passenger seat and gave them Marcus's description, the truck plate number I had memorized when we arrived at Linda's address, and a description of what I had seen under the tarp, including the cord that had been hanging from the edge. The officer I spoke with asked me to stay on the line while she ran the plate. She came back and asked me to confirm the plate number a second time. Then she said units were being dispatched and asked if I was safe and away from the location. I said yes. I found out through a follow-up call 2 days later that Marcus had been stopped approximately 4 miles from his mother's house. The items under the tarp included electronics and other household goods that had been reported stolen from 2 separate residential burglaries in the Stone Oak area the previous week. Marcus had used the furniture pickup as a logistical cover for transporting stolen property in broad daylight on a Saturday morning, a time when a truck loaded with furniture moving through a residential neighborhood attracted no attention from neighbors or passing officers. Linda was not charged. The investigation confirmed she had no knowledge of the stolen items and had genuinely been selling her own furniture. She called me through the marketplace message thread 3 days after the incident and apologized in a way that was clearly genuine and clearly devastating for her. I told her she had nothing to apologize for. I meant it. The bedroom set is in my apartment. It is beautiful and well made, and I genuinely love it. I think about Marcus's hands on the dresser every time I open the top drawer, and I imagine that feeling will eventually fade, and most days I believe it. Look at what else is in the truck when someone offers to help you load. You are allowed to look. You are allowed to ask. And if you see a cord hanging from under a tarp, and the person near the tailgate keeps positioning himself between you, and it trusts what your eyes are telling you, they are almost certainly right. Or, story 2, the guitar. My name is Danny. I was 24 years old, a musician and part-time guitar instructor living in Nashville, Tennessee, who had been saving for 8 months to buy a vintage acoustic guitar. The Facebook Marketplace listing said 1968, Martin D28, original case, all original hardware, some play wear, consistent with age, asking 4,500 serious buyers only will meet locally. The seller's profile showed a man named Gary Whitfield, early 60s, a history of posts about country music and fishing and grandchildren, the kind of profile that reads as, the real accumulated life of a real person. His listing had been up for 3 days and had multiple comments from people asking if it was still available. I messaged him on a Monday morning. He replied within the hour, yes, still available. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop in Brentwood on Wednesday at 2 p.m. so I could inspect the guitar before committing to the price. Tell me in the comments if you have ever come close to making a big financial decision based on a listing that turned out to be something completely different from what it appeared to be. Because Gary Whitfield was real. The Facebook profile was real. The guitar was real. What Gary did not tell me until I was sitting across from him at that coffee shop table with the case open between us was the part that changed everything. Gary was at the coffee shop when I arrived, the guitar case on the floor beside his chair, a cup of coffee already half finished in front of him. He was exactly as his profile photos suggested, a solid and straightforward man in his early 60s, with calloused hands and the easy manner of someone who had worked outdoors for most of his life. He opened the case when I sat down and I looked at the guitar, and I will tell you that it was genuinely exceptional. The spruce top had darkened to a beautiful amber over 55 years. The mahogany back and sides were clean. The neck was straight. The original tuning machines were all present and functional. It was exactly what the listing described. I played it for about 10 minutes, running through chord shapes and finger-picking patterns, while Gary watched with the patient attention of someone who understood what he was selling. Then I set it back in the case and asked him about its history. Gary told me he had owned the guitar for 22 years and had played it regularly for the first 15 before his arthritis made extended playing uncomfortable. He said he had bought it from an estate sale in Kentucky and had always intended to find out more about its provenance, but had never gotten around to it. Then he said something he had not said in the listing or in our messages. He said the serial number had been checked by a friend of his at a music store and had come back as a guitar that had been reported as part of an insurance claim in 1994. He said his friend thought the claim might have been fraudulent, that the original owner might have filed the claim and then sold the guitar rather than actually losing it, and that the guitar had been in circulation since then through multiple private sales. He said he had bought it in good faith and had no reason to believe he had done anything wrong. He said he was telling me this because he believed in being upfront with people and that he thought I deserved to know before I bought it. I sat with that information for a minute. I asked him for the serial number. He gave it to me. I took a photograph of the guitar in the case and thanked Gary for his honesty and told him I needed to think about it and would be in touch. I drove home and spent 2 hours researching the serial number through publicly available guitar registry databases and the National Insurance Crime Bureau's free search tool. The guitar appeared in an insurance claim filed in Tennessee in 1994 under the name of a music store that had subsequently closed. The claim had been paid. The guitar had never been recovered and returned to the insurer, and was technically the property of whatever insurance company had settled the claim nearly 30 years ago. Purchasing a guitar in that status would have made me the possessor of property with a complicated legal history that could surface at any point, particularly given that vintage Martin guitars of that model and year were increasingly well documented and traceable as the vintage market grew. I messaged Gary and thanked him for telling me, and told him I could not purchase the instrument given its history. He replied that he understood and appreciated me letting him know. He said he was going to look into the proper way to resolve the guitar's status before selling it to anyone. I found a different D28 from 1972 3 months later through a verified vintage instrument dealer with full provenance documentation. It cost me $500 more than Gary's guitar. I have played it at every gig and lesson since, and I have never once regretted the extra $500 or the 2 months of additional saving it required. What I think about is Gary's decision to tell me. He did not have to, The listing had not mentioned it. Our messages had not mentioned it. He could have sat across that coffee shop table and let me play the guitar and count out $4,500 and walked out with the money, and I would not have known until and unless something surfaced later. He chose not to do that. The guitar world in Nashville is smaller than it appears. Vintage instruments talk in the way that all documented objects eventually talk when enough people are paying attention. Gary understood that and made a decision that cost him the sale, and I respect him for it more than I can easily articulate. Verify serial numbers before purchasing any significant vintage instrument. The NICB database is free and takes 4 minutes. Vintage guitar registries are publicly searchable. The 5 minutes of research is the difference between a clean purchase and a complicated one. And if a seller volunteers information that works against their own financial interest, that is almost always the sign of someone worth dealing with, honestly, in return. Story 3. The apartment showing. My name is Rebecca. I was 27 years old, a high school English teacher in Columbus, Ohio, looking for a new apartment after my landlord announced he was selling the building, and all tenants needed to vacate within 60 days. 60 days in a competitive rental market is not much time, and I was looking at every available platform simultaneously: ZillowApartments.com, Craigslist, and Facebook Marketplace, which had become an increasingly active source for private landlord listings in my area. The marketplace listing said 1-bedroom apartment, renovated hardwood floors, in-unit washer-dryer, off-street parking, $950 a month, available first of next month. Contact Paul for showing. Paul's profile showed a man in his 40s, an account with several years of history, and posts about home improvement projects and local Columbus sports teams. The listing had been active for 2 days and had multiple comments asking about availability. I messaged Paul on a Thursday evening, and he responded within 30 minutes and offered to show the apartment Saturday afternoon at 1 p.m. Stay with me because Paul was not a landlord, and the apartment he showed me on Saturday belonged to someone who had no idea their home was being listed on Facebook Marketplace while they were away for the weekend. I want to describe the showing as it happened so you understand exactly how convincing it was. Paul met me on the sidewalk outside the building, a 4-unit brick building in the Italian Village neighborhood, which was an area I knew and liked. He was dressed in khaki pants and a collared shirt, carrying a small folder with papers. He unlocked the main entrance with a key on a standard landlord-style key ring with multiple keys on it. He let me into the first floor unit on the right side. The apartment was furnished and lived in with personal items on the surfaces, which Paul explained by saying the current tenant was finishing out their lease and would be fully moved out before the first of the month. The apartment was exactly as the listing described. The hardwood floors had been refinished recently. The kitchen had been updated. The washer and dryer were tucked into a closet off the hallway. It was a genuinely nice apartment at a price that was reasonable for the neighborhood and the condition. Paul gave me a showing that lasted about 20 minutes. He knew the apartment well. He answered every question I asked about utilities, the parking situation, the lease terms, the security deposit, the pet policy. He had a printed lease agreement in his folder that he offered to leave with me to review. He said he had 2 other showings that afternoon, and that if I was interested, I should let him know by Sunday evening. I told him I was very interested and that I would be in touch by Sunday. I left feeling genuinely hopeful about the place. On my drive home, I did something I had started doing with every apartment showing after a friend's bad experience the previous year. I searched the building address in the Franklin County Auditor's Property Records database which is publicly accessible online and shows the registered owner of every property in the county. The registered owner of the building was not Paul. The registered owner was a woman named Catherine Morris, who had owned the building for 11 years. I searched Catherine Morris in combination with the building address and Facebook. Her profile was not difficult to find. A recent post from that morning showed her at a winery in Hocking Hills, a scenic area about an hour southeast of Columbus, captioned "Weekend Getaway," with her partner and 2 friends. The post had been made 4 hours before Paul showed me the apartment. Catherine was an hour away at a winery, while a man named Paul was showing her apartment to prospective tenants, using a key she had not given him. I pulled over on the side of the road and sat for a moment. Then I called Columbus Police Non-Emergency. I gave them the building address, Paul's name, and physical description, the Facebook Marketplace listing, and Catherine's post showing she was away from the property. I told the dispatcher that the showing had ended approximately 40 minutes ago, and that Paul had said he had additional showings scheduled that afternoon. Officers were dispatched to the building. They arrived during Paul's second showing of the afternoon. He was inside the unit with another prospective tenant when officers knocked. Paul was found to have a key to the building that investigators determined had been copied from a key belonging to a handyman who had done work on the building 6 months earlier and had not returned all copies of his access key when the job concluded. Paul had obtained the copied key through his connection to the handyman and had been using it to access the unit. The marketplace listing had collected 23 inquiries in 2 days. Paul had conducted 4 showings before officers arrived during the 5th. He had been collecting information from each prospective tenant names, employment details, and in 2 cases had received partial security deposits in cash from people who had been ready to commit to the lease without further investigation. The printed lease agreement he had been showing was a template document with Paul's name inserted as landlord. It was realistic enough to pass a quick read, but contained no legitimate contact information that would have traced back to any verifiable business or individual. Catherine was contacted by police and returned from Hocking Hills that evening. Her building had been shown to 23 strangers without her knowledge, using a key she had not authorized. Her tenants' personal belongings had been accessible to every person Paul brought through the space. The 2 prospective tenants who had paid partial deposits recovered their money through the fraud case. The process took several months. I found my apartment through a property management company with a verified office address and a business license registered in Franklin County. I signed a lease with a company representative whose identity I confirmed against the business registry before I signed anything. I paid my deposit by check, made out to the management company rather than to any individual. The apartment cost $50 a month more than Paul's listing. I have been here for 2 years, and every month when I pay rent, I think about the $50 difference and feel nothing but satisfied about it. Check the property owner before you tour any apartment listed by a private individual on any platform. The Franklin County Auditor database took me 4 minutes on a drive home from a Saturday afternoon showing. Most counties in the United States have equivalent public record systems accessible online for free. The key that Paul used was copied from a handyman who had never returned it. The apartment looked lived in because it was someone's actual home. The folder of papers looked professional because Paul had spent time making it look professional. Every element of the showing was constructed to produce confidence in prospective tenants who were operating under time pressure in a tight rental market. I was one of 23 people who walked through that building believing they had found a place to live. 22 of us left without understanding what we had actually walked into. I found out 40 minutes later on the side of the road because I looked up a property record on my phone before I let myself get too excited about hardwood floors and an in-unit washer dryer. 4 minutes. That's the whole margin. 4 minutes and a county auditor database that exists specifically so that anyone can know who actually owns a piece of property before they make any decision about it. Use it every time. Before every tour, before any deposit, before you sign anything with anyone you have not verified against a public record. The apartment was beautiful. I genuinely wish it had been available through legitimate means, but wishing a thing is legitimate does not make it so, and a beautiful apartment shown by someone with a copied key is not an apartment you want to live in, regardless of the hardwood floors.